Hello and welcome to the Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Ligato, and today we're coming back with the video and our provided analysis and commentary for Vladimir Putin's speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And we're in, I think, the last half an hour of this speech, and Vladimir Putin has given us a ton of very meaningful information that we can use to figure out exactly the state of Russia and how Russia is planning on changing as a country in the future and how that will impact the wider world. So let's get right into this speech so that we can further understand Vladimir Putin's mindset.
Or to citizens, then they should not be subject to inspections at all, either scheduled or extraordinary inspections. Preventive measures will suffice. Mr. President, these are the decisions we arrive at based on our cooperation with the business. I'm sorry that I'm taking so much time, but maybe this will be of some use to you to get acquainted with our business practices. Next year, we will assess the effect of the current measures I'm proposing. But I believe that preventive measures will suffice. Whereas next year, we will continue decreasing the administrative burden on the companies. I also believe we need to keep working on such an instrument as the business climate transformation, which...
So we talked about this last time as well, but Vladimir Putin is really sounding like a libertarian here. He's wanting to remove government, make them take preventative measures instead of proactive measures unless it's a high-risk environment. He's trying to reduce administrative bloat. I really feel like this guy understands exactly how I think, because I used to talk about this a lot, not only in an academic institution where administrative bloat has led to skyrocketing student loan debts because of increases in the tuition, but also in, obviously, government. Administrative bloat has gone obscene to the point where the vast majority of the administrative positions are really just ridiculous positions that shouldn't exist, and they don't serve any functional purpose. There's some pretty funny accounts related to academic administrative positions. The assistant dean account on Twitter, it's ASS Dean's assistant dean account. But yeah, a lot, and it's supposed to be a joke, but in reality, the various administrative positions, things like assistant deans, assistants to the dean, those are just complete administrative bloat. They don't really serve a functional purpose. They just make changes in order to affirm that their job actually deserves to exist. It should continue to exist. And so you're seeing here that he's recognizing that in all types of organizations, the administrative bloat can happen, and they have to actively work to reduce it. So it's interesting to see a world leader talk in such terms.
Seeks to create a conducive environment for business people across all Russia's regions. We have already fostered contacts with the business associations, and at their initiative, we introduce amendments to the legislative framework. This year, we've updated roadmaps in industrial construction, export, corporate management. In the near future, I would like to ask you to do the same for urban planning, high-tech, and AI, as well as in tourism and intellectual property. I would like to remind you that in the past, in order to assess the business environment, we used to resort to the World Bank rankings, and there were some good results there too. There is some common sense, a very good incentive that stimulates competition. Such a ranking is worth using. We shouldn't abandon this idea.
Okay. Off on a little bit of a tangent here, but rankings can be beneficial, but they could also be detrimental for companies or individuals, really. And they're beneficial in the sense that they give you some goal to strive for. I got to get past Ben. I got to be better than Ben at this, right? But at the same time, if you are super far behind in a ranking, it really does make you very unmotivated. It demotivates you. It makes you less willing to try things and work to succeed because you're so far behind. It's hard to catch up. So rankings can serve a purpose, but you have to be really cautious about how you implement them so that they're a benefit instead of a detriment. And even if you do everything right, they still have some negative impacts. But you just have to make sure that the positive impacts outweigh the negative.
Yeah. But we need to have objective criteria that allow us to have a look sort of from outside to assess our progress. That is why I instruct the government to work together with business associations and the Strategic Initiatives Agency to come up with the Russian domestic model for key targets at the national level, using the best practices from across the world to go step by step and to implement this model in practice at the regional and national level. Of course, the most important criterion from the point of view of the business community is the improvement of legal application and decriminalization of our penal legislation. We need to remove blurred formulas in the legislative framework and the so-called elastic articles. We need to bring to a minimum the number of cases when investigations disrupt enterprises and lead to collapse of these companies. I spoke about that on many occasions, but I would like to remind the business community and assure you that we are not abandoning this project. We're going to keep at it. A year ago, I floated a number of initiatives in this field. Many of them have become laws. Some are currently under discussion in the government and the parliament. It's hard to find a compromise, but I would like to ask colleagues not to drag their feet and to provide us with some outcome decisions. A number of proposals I would like to make based on my meeting with the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs and with Business Russia. I'm talking about those norms of penal legislation that either simply overlap with the Code of Administrative Offenses or are no longer valid. For more than 10 years, we're not resorting to the thresholds for significant and very significant property damage that is not related to theft and related to copyright and related rights, because right now foreign companies refuse to supply their software and other services. So I think these thresholds have to be doubled at the very minimum. And the same goes to economic crimes. For which no imprisonment is prescribed. I'm talking about, for instance, avoiding the disclosure of information under the legislation on securities. On a particular note, I have said that the number of business inspections has decreased, but I made a reservation there, because right now business people say that instead of oversight companies, they have law enforcement agencies coming to them. There are no violations, but they still come and try to find some foul play. Sometimes this must be justified, but what we see is basically a substitution of notions, because we say there are not going to be inspections, but inspections is still very much in place. It's just they bear a different name and other people come, and this undermines the trust in the oversight mechanisms, and this affects.
Okay, so getting into a little bit of the more boring stuff, some interesting stuff he said here was related to like things like intellectual property and how they're going to be a lot more lenient on people who take electronic intellectual property just because of the fact that foreign companies won't work in Russia anymore, and they're like, well, we still want those goods, we might as well pirate them. Interesting. I mean, he put in lighter terms, but that's exactly, I think that's what he meant. That's my interpretation of it. He's also talking here about just keeping your word. keeping your word as a government, keeping your word as any type of organization, keeping your word as an individual, over time, you have to remember that life is an iterative game. And so if you break trust early on, then later on, when people or other organizations interact with you, they're not going to trust you anymore. I've talked about this in other videos, but democracy has kind of an outlet for that, where it's like, oh, this is a new administration. You can trust us. You can't trust those guys before us that didn't keep their word. They were other Democrats, or they were other Republicans, or they were the other party, et cetera, et cetera. And so we see that trust is very important, and people like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping realize that, and they make sure that if they say that they're going to have fewer inspections, that they are going to have fewer inspections. They're not going to call it something else. And so they're monitoring the situation when the inspections happen. They're not supposed to happen. They're just called something different. He's making sure that that type of thing doesn't happen again. And it gets back to, you have to be able to trust the government. If the government lies to you about relatively simple things like that, then they're probably going to be lying to you about other stuff in the future. And so you have to be able to trust them in order to cooperate with them in the future.
Their work. If inspections are kept, they have to be carried only by the competent bodies. So I would like to ask the government to work with the Prosecutor General's office and the Interior Ministry to enshrine this norm in our legislation and to closely follow the application of this norm. This is of the utmost importance, because otherwise there's just no point in doing what we're doing. We need to put this all on paper. As one comedian said, we have to be very careful and prudent. We have to work out through all the legal minutiae. Next, the business climate in...
Wait a minute. That doesn't sound like something a comedian would say. I don't know. If there was a punchline to that, I think Vladimir Putin might have missed that punchline, but we'll give it to him. I mean, he's good in other regards. If he's not able to perfectly retell a joke by a comedian, then I very unfortunate. But luckily, he is a better statesman than he is a comedian. And we'll leave it at that for now. We'll come back with another segment, hopefully getting closer and closer. Don't look at that timeline bar at the bottom there. It's not actually 4 hours. That's multiple different things for this video. I think it goes to about 2 hours and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 45 minutes. So we're almost done with our analysis of this video, but we've got a lot of interesting takes looking at the legalese, the various legal minutiae within Russia. It might not sound interesting at first, but you're getting a sense for the direction that Vladimir Putin is going in. And if you're listening to Western media, it's probably the exact opposite of what you'd expect. I mean, you're told that this guy is a authoritarian dictator who wants control of everything, and then you just heard a speech. I mean, this has been multiple video segments for me of him talking about essentially being a Ron or Rand Paul libertarian, just like, got to get rid of big government, we got to have more efficient bureaucracy, less administrative bloat, over and over again. So yeah, it's interesting. And if this is your first time hearing a Vladimir Putin speech, this is probably different than what you were expecting if you've been listening to the mainstream media in the West. And so I'll leave you there. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more content. We're constantly innovating here, new things all the time. I'm sure most of you noticed I recently got a new webcam. We're going to get a new mic soon. We're going to have a content creation studio, new computer, new internet, all kinds of things. We're going to do live streams eventually after the new internet. So just stick with us. We are a growing channel. Just to share some of the successes of the channel so far, we did get a video over 3,000 views. So yay. Anyways, thanks for sticking with us. We'll be back with more content that is improved content as well. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.